Hey there, welcome back to Reddit XO, the best channel for Reddit cheating stories. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification for more stories like these. Worst way to catch a cheating wife. This will be lengthy since it occurred some years ago, and I have just now been compelled to share it after reading so many tales and personal experiences on this site. It is my goal that my tale can be of assistance to someone else who is dealing with infidelity. My ex-wife and I were married for over 2 decades. I was a professional firefighter before we met. I began my career when I graduated from high school at 17 and enrolled in fire academy with a parent waiver. I am a 4th-generation firefighter, and I continued to work in the field throughout our marriage, rising to the rank of battalion chief before requesting demotion back to rescue captain of my department's rescue squad, since that was where all of my certifications and other credentials were located. On one occasion, on Christmas Eve, we got a call about a structure fire in an apartment complex. When we arrived on the site, there were 18 people who had gone missing. We began rescue operations, and in one unit, I discovered a young husband and wife. I helped them out, and as a tender changed my air bottle, a young woman sitting with medics began screaming, "My baby, my baby." I approached her and asked her, "Ma'am, what kind of baby I was looking for? A dog, a cat, a human, or something else?" All she yelled was "my baby" over and over again, so I raced back inside the building. A little time later, I emerged with a newborn, and as I was making my way out, something within the building exploded, spreading debris all over the place. I was struck in the back by a piece of wood that looked like a massive splinter. I eventually managed to make it to the triage area, where I handed over the baby and promptly fell. That's when I saw the splinter was discovered, protruding from my body. When I was airlifted to a trauma center on the way, I passed out twice and was revived, and I was rushed into surgery right soon. The splinter had nicked my heart, and I was on the verge of death. My wife was contacted by my crew and informed of what had occurred. She informed my team that she would not be attending, stating that she had more important things to do than worry about my ploy for her attention and how I was attempting to get into her pants via my profession. For the next 30 days, I remained in the hospital because the doctors would not release me until they were satisfied that I was well enough to return home to a very remote place around 60 miles from where I worked in a real hospital. When I was freed, I attempted to arrange for my wife to take me up, but she informed me that she did not have time to make the journey. The only way I could get home was to beg for a ride, and when I eventually did, it was from one of my crew members, who escorted me inside my house to make sure I was all right and not alone. After walking inside my house seeking for my wife, since her minivan was in the driveway, I sank to my knees as my crew member came up behind me and said, "WTF are you doing?" The first thing we saw when we opened the door to our bedroom was my wife in bed with a guy beneath her in her kitty, another behind her in her butt, and a third in her mouth. At first, the thing that got to me the most was the one in her buttocks and mouth, which were things she never done with me, and that I had never attempted since I was too huge and would choke her or injure her. My friend assisted me in getting up and out of the car. He then went inside the house and got some clothing for me to take. He drove me to the house of another acquaintance, where we discussed the events that had happened. It was later revealed to me that when my buddy walked into the house to fetch some items for me, her ex and her boy toys did not stop what they were doing, and that he was able to capture mobile phone footage of them without them realizing it. Following that, my friends assisted me in locating an attorney and initiating the divorce process. Fortunately, our children were now adults, and we did not have to go through the ordeal of a divorce with them, since I discovered in court that everyone in our pal circle, with the exception of me, was receiving part of my wife's property. She acknowledged to the court that she was doing every guy in town, that I was nothing more than a salary, and that she always hoped I would die in the line of duty so that she could collect on the $1 million life insurance policy that we had if I was murdered on the job. We met when she was young, and she remained that way throughout her life, albeit she was a bit sluggish in many areas. However, when her mother lost everything and came in with us for a time, that is when my wife started to change. The whole time, her mother didn't reside in the same homes, since we purchased a small structure and converted it into a little cottage on the rear end of our property, so that we could have more solitude. It was only after I put her mother out back that I saw the changes in her. It was difficult for me to notice red flags and other warning signs because I was the only one working and I would work 48 hours on and 24 hours off. The normal schedule is 24 hours on and 48 hours off. But because she refused to work, I was forced to work double shifts and even take on a second job to support the 5 of us on my own: wife, 2 children, mother-in-law, and myself. Since catching her, the house has been sold and everything that was mutual property has been divided, sold, and split, among other things. My crew has rallied around me, being there to help me when I needed it, as well as to assist me in attempting to return to duty status, as well as to be there when I needed someone to talk to, among other things. The majority of the men and women on my team were from the city where we worked, so it was at least an hour travel each way to help me. Working my tail hard to reclaim my career was top priority for me. I wanted to reach the 3 to 5 year milestone and then retire. After completing my medical and other requirements to return to duty, I was brought into the chief's office, where I was informed, "Captain, you have a choice between 2 options. You have 2 options. Either you may retire now at 30 years and maintain your full pension and benefits, or we will medically retire you and give you half of your pension and perks." I stumbled through my return to duty examinations, but I passed. After receiving the response I received, "Captain, you are one of the best fire rescue specialists I've ever known, but due to your age, injury history, and most recently your recent diagnosis of PTSD combined with bipolar, your insurance company will no longer cover you due to high risk." I was shocked. As a result, do you have a decision? I retired, leaving my sad and dejected. When my now ex-wife discovered what had happened, she proceeded to abuse me over it, presumably in an attempt to drive me to suicide. Instead of allowing her to prevail, I left the region and began working in animal rescue to help pass the time. It was the lowest moment of my life at the time. I was living in an RV trailer while operating an animal rescue organization, and no one would hire me. Despite the fact that I didn't need to work, I wanted something to do. I swore off women, with the exception of my sister, who is a fireman, and I didn't socialize, date, or do anything else for a long time. I was certain that I would never be in a relationship again, and that I would never be able to trust anybody ever again. That had happened. I started playing one of those massively multiplayer online role-playing games and met a woman. We started chatting and eventually exchanged numbers. And then 18 months later, she decided she wanted to meet me and told me, "No way, you're a perv or anything, because no one is going to invest this much time to pick a target." This made me laugh harder than I'd ever laughed in my life. Yeah, I was hesitant at first because of our 20-year age difference and the fact that we were of different races in a place where interracial relationships are still frowned upon. Yes, it's Redneckville, USA, and practically in the Stone Age in many respects. But I eventually consented to meet her. I can honestly say that it was the finest choice I've ever made, since she was all I could have hoped for and more. She was old-fashioned like me, nurtured in the belief that a woman's first and most important responsibility was to her husband and family, not money and a profession. I have no objections to a woman who works, but regardless of gender, family should always come first, before anything else in life. To some extent, it's ironic that I lost my father during the Vietnam War and that I am now married to a Vietnamese lady who is expecting our first kid in November of 2021. In my opinion, cheating is the worst thing we may go through in our lifetime. However, please keep in mind that it is not the end of the world. Your cheating husband is not representative of all men or all women. Make time for yourself, seek assistance, and rediscover your sense of self. Remember to take your time and keep in mind that something greater is out there seeking for you as well. Suicide is never an acceptable solution. Giving up should never be considered an option. You are strong, and you can do it. Your life can be rebuilt and transformed into a fresh, better version of itself. Keep in mind that life and love will always find a way. Now, let's go for story 2. I have been married for 19 years when my wife began to cheat on me. This is my first time posting on Reddit, so bear with me. I'll be 75 years old in July, and I've seen a lot in my time. To be really honest, I wanted to share my tale with the younger generation before I passed away. Because I have lung cancer and don't expect to be around for much longer, it is critical that this information be made public. In 1964, I was 18 years old and got married. The feeling I'm having is that I'm not even the same person anymore. I used to be in excellent physical condition, but now I'm confined to a wheelchair. My wife and I were both forced to work full-time since I did not have enough money to sustain both of us on our own. I worked in construction, and she worked at a hotel as a housekeeper. We never had children, so we had plenty of free time on the weekends to spend with each other. I don't recall any disagreements between us, but it's been so long that I'm forgetting specifics. We were, however, quite friendly and didn't have any problems getting along. Over time, I began to earn more money, and she was able to leave her work and devote her time to her children. I did, however, work longer hours at night, and our marriage ultimately became more of a friendship, to be honest. We didn't have much, and although I still loved her, I felt like our relationship had changed. We didn't spend nearly enough time together at the conclusion of the semester. With my employment, I accept full responsibility for sending us down the incorrect path. As you will see later on, this was not the only problem, but I should have addressed it while I still had the opportunity to do so. When I go home from work one evening, everything seems to be as it should be. Dinner was served, and the television was tuned to baseball, which used to be one of my favorite sports back in the day. I spoke with her for a few minutes in the kitchen before retiring to my room to change out of my work clothes. On my nightstand, I discovered a package of condoms when I went to check on my things. The fact that I had a vasectomy years before this and had never used condoms caused me to become concerned. I quickly inquired of my wife about them, and she was unable to come up with an adequate answer in time. She burst into tears and confessed her deception to the group. She invited her coworker over for while I was gone, but she didn't remember to take the condoms out with her. After hearing it, I'm not afraid to confess that I shed a few tears as well. She said that she was just not attracted to me, was lonely, and did not like when I inquired as to her motivation for doing this. I was at a loss for what to say and ended up walking away. After 19 years of marriage, my wife and I decided to separate. I was a complete and utter wreck when I was in my 40s. I had completely lost all confidence and drive to continue. I began to consume alcoholic beverages and gradually developed into an alcoholic. It took me until I was in my 60s before I was able to break this habit. I couldn't look myself in the eyes and not see myself as a failure of a man, so I didn't. I wanted to start dating again, but I was afraid that the same thing might happen again. It had never occurred to me that I was a lousy sleeper, and I honestly didn't know what to say in response, even though my skin began to wrinkle, particularly on the backs of my legs. For a time I took satisfaction in preserving my shape. And when I had relations with my wife throughout our marriage, I swear she appreciated it. I maintained my tough man persona well into my 30s, and I continued to wear my bandana during, which was a major turn-on for my lady love. I was always generous and willing to go down on her when she asked me to do so. It was my usage offerings that allowed me to keep erections, and I had the ability to extra hard, which was something she had a penchant for. If I gave it my all, there was no way I could possibly do anything else. When I reached an advanced age of 40, I began to consider the possibility that was no longer necessary, and I began dating again around 5 years ago. She told me that there was nothing wrong with me, despite the fact that we don't have an active life. I remarried last year, which was a wonderful experience, but sadly, it was also the time when I was diagnosed with cancer. My vitality has dwindled significantly since then, and my new wife is the only one who can keep me going. We are attempting chemotherapy, but the outlook is grim. In order to make the world a better place in my remaining days, I want to impart some of the information I've accumulated over the years. My mental faculties are also deteriorating, therefore I must take action now, before it is too late to reverse the trend. I hope that everyone who reads this can take something away from it to make their lives better. Now, let's go for story 3. My wife, 27F, has been working from home for the last several months and has been inviting her high school ex-boyfriend over on a regular basis. I informed her that what she was doing was wrong. Is it possible that I'm making a mistake here? Hello there, everyone. I understand that the title may seem to be confusing without the context that I will provide shortly. So, since COVID began operations, my wife has been able to work from home. My employer would never allow us to do so. Therefore, I've continued to drive to work every day. She has a pal with whom she spends some of her time on occasion. He's been asked to hang out with the two of us in the past as well. He's kind, a lot of fun to be around, and he's quite cool. This hasn't presented any difficulties for me. My wife informed me quite early on that she had a relationship with him while in high school. She said that they were in a relationship between their freshman and sophomore years. They never had, but they did have a good time. During their senior year, they began to reestablish themselves as friends. His girlfriend was beginning to see another man at the time, according to the tone of his voice. It is her contention that following their breakup, there was no further romantic activity between them ever. When COVID first began, my wife said that she would be able to work from home if she so desired. I was relieved and delighted for her, since I knew it would be simpler and even save money on petrol. She said that her buddy would be able to work from home as well, and that they would be able to get together sometimes to look over their work and assist one another. They both work in a similar field. When I returned home one day, I saw that he had moved in next to me. I didn't think much of it, since my wife had informed me about the situation. They were both seated in front of their laptops, and it seemed like they were both working quite hard. This was the situation for a time. After a few weeks, I'd arrive home to find them casually hanging around and having a good time together. Some days they would be playing a game, other days they would be drinking, and other days they would be eating. As time went on, I became more perplexed by this. It seemed that he was receiving more attention than I was, and that she was having a more enjoyable experience with him than I was. And then there was that one day when I returned home, which was the last straw. They were both sitting on the sofa, with her head resting on his lap while they watched television. I waited until he had departed before approaching her and having a conversation with her. I was in a rage. Angry, I confronted her and informed her that their behavior had been wrong and that there was no need for her to be lying with a friend in such a manner. I conveyed my dissatisfaction with the fact that she seemed to be paying more attention to him than her husband, and that it seemed that they were having more fun together than we were. Not to add that they had previously dated and had a good time together. She became quite furious and said that I had no authority to tell her that she could no longer associate with someone. The fact that I seemed to suggest that she was cheating on me with him enraged her, and she promised that she was not and would not do so in the future. They were just resting, she said, and she didn't think it was inappropriate for her to rest her head on his lap. He has not been at the house when I returned home the previous 2 days, and I'm concerned. She claims that she hasn't seen him since we last spoke with him. I expressed my regret for being so enraged over it. She doesn't appear to have taken my apologies seriously, as she has been quite quiet in my presence since after I apologized. What can I do to make things better? Is she attempting to defraud you? What should I do in the situation between her and his friend? Update. So, last week, I posted on a few Facebook sites about my wife spending time at our home with an old high school ex-boyfriend that she used to date when she was younger. Since the beginning of COVID, he had been visiting her and working from home with her on various projects. To be honest, I didn't think much of it at first, since they were merely assisting one another with their job. After that, they began to socialize and do other things. When I discovered her sleeping down with her head resting on his lap, I had had enough of her. I informed her that he would no longer be permitted to visit. She was enraged and took offense to this, but she consented anyhow. The vast majority of folks in this room agreed with me that her actions were questionable. His presence was made aware to me, and I was informed that he could still come over throughout the day and leave before I arrived. I ultimately decided to purchase a camera that I could put up and conceal while at work. My living room has one and my bedroom has another. I didn't notice anything remarkable on the first day they were up and running. It all occurred on the second day of the week. The ex-boyfriend showed up. At first, they were simply doing their jobs, but then he began getting a little physical with her. It developed to the point where they needed to get up and go to our bedroom to sleep together. I was taken aback. I was at a loss for what to do. After seeing my wife for the first time in a while, I inquired as to whether she had continued to see him. She categorically rejected it. I informed her that I had security cameras put throughout the home. Her expression drastically shifted at that point. She was aware of what I had seen. She burst into tears almost instantly. I informed her that she needed to leave the home. Despite her best efforts to apologize and explain herself, I was not having any of it. Since then, we've only spoken to each other once more. I informed her that I didn't see how anything else could happen but a divorce in the near future. She said that she does not want to do so and asked if I would be willing to go to couples therapy for a single session before making a final choice. I consented, but only after much deliberation. I don't expect it to be successful, and I'm mostly doing it to amuse her. While I'm penning this, I'm still searching for and attempting to contact divorce lawyers.